Welcome back to Basic Business Training 1, and our session today is on money management. We're glad that you're able to be with us, and if you remember in our last session we talked about cost analysis and pricing, and we were looking to make sure that the price that we are giving to the customer is good for the customer, but it also is good for us as the owners. We want to make sure that our cost, our price covers our variable cost, what the customer takes with them, our fixed costs, the things that we have to pay regardless of sales, and of course the profit that we want to make. And if you remember, profit encompassed a number of different things: the savings that you might need to do for your business, the depreciation on the equipment that you would have, the salary for the owner called the owner's draw, and other investment things that you might want to do, either in loving your neighbor, giving something back to the community, or some business development that you might want to do. So today we want to look at money management and what do we do with this money as it starts coming in. It's a very important part of what we do, and often we don't love math, we don't love keeping records. It does take a discipline to do it, but it is very important that we do it if we want to see our business grow. If you want to also have integrity and accountability and transparency, these are things that we say are very important values, and Scripture encourages us to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of man. And to be able to do that means that we have to keep records and we have to be accountable. And so we want to look at this and spend some time in this session talking about record keeping. Now, I know that if I was with you in person, I would ask you, how many of you believe that record keeping or bookkeeping is important? And I think everybody's hand will go up. At least that's been my experience. And then if I asked how many of you are actually keeping records of your books, most of those hands would go back down. And so this is a challenge almost everywhere we do business, because we believe that it's important, but we don't necessarily do it. And I wonder why that is. And I've asked people, what is the barrier, of course, for doing bookkeeping? Well, one of the things that we'll talk about those barriers in a minute. Let me just remind you why it is important. Record keeping is not an end in and of itself. It is a means to an end. And I think that's one of the confusing parts. When we see that record keeping, the purpose of record keeping is to say that I do record keeping, we have missed the point. Record keeping is to help us to discern what is happening in the business. What products or services are doing well? Which ones are not? What seasons are more favorable than other seasons? What day of the week? What time of the year? And so on and so forth. What is it that is causing our business to go up and down, and what can we learn? And therefore, how can we manage potential growth, or if we have to cut back, we are aware of what is going on. So the goal of doing bookkeeping is to improve the operation and the profitability of the business for the point of flourishing. Records help us understand what is going on in our business. They help us to analyze past business performance and make necessary changes that will improve your performance. Records can help you know, of course, the inflow and the outflow of money, and they can serve as a historical account of your business and can be used for future reference. And so much of the bookkeeping that we do is actually for the owner. It's for the manager of the business, the one who needs to make decisions about where this business is going to go. Records can help us answer questions that every business person asks. Which of my products are the most popular? What expenses are associated with the goods that I sell? Another question is, have I earned more money last month than last year or than the previous month? All of these things are questions that we can ask. And then, of course, what are the trends that you're seeing, especially with customers? In our next session, we'll talk about customer satisfaction, but it's good to begin identifying and thinking about those customers. When is it that they are shopping? Is it the day after salaries, and salaries go off and out at the end of the month? Is it the day of the week that you tend to see more sales? And those are trends that you want to make sure that you can keep inventory and stock present there so that you can keep your customers happy. Now, back to the excuses. Why is it that we say bookkeeping is important, but we don't often do it? And there are two primary excuses that I hear. The first is, my business is so small, I know everything that is going on. And that's actually a false assumption that can hurt your business. If your business is small now, it will stay small if you don't begin to analyze and investigate and are curious about what is actually going on in the business. I have seen a number of business people who believe that they don't need to keep records, and they find after some time that they've been losing money on one thing or another, or their cost isn't actually covering, or their price is not actually covering their cost, and that becomes a problem. But without doing the record keeping, you don't know what is happening. And so don't think that your business is too small. Don't despise small beginnings. We want to take the same principles and apply it to any size business so that it can show the growth and we can see the capacity of where there can be growth. But another one is, I am just too busy to keep records. I don't have time for it. And we use the same excuse with budgeting. I don't have time to do budgeting. Being busy is an excuse. It has to do with your priorities. I remember one time my pastor said to us as a congregation, he said, I don't want you to tell me that you're too busy. Saying you're too busy means that you're not managing your schedule. And I thought that was a very unfortunate comment because it was a very nice excuse to tell people I'm too busy. But what he was saying is it has to do with your priorities. Manage your schedule. Be in charge of the things that God has given you to do. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And if you believe that record keeping is important, it needs to become a priority. And so we recommend that you set aside 30 minutes at the end of every day to do what you need to do as it relates to record keeping. You recommend that you set aside 2 hours, maybe towards the end of the week, where you are analyzing and are looking through what it is that you have accomplished during those 5 days. And that time should be precious time. It should be time that is not interrupted. It should be time where you close a door of whatever room that you are in and you put your phone away, and maybe you get a calculator so you're not tempted to use the calculator on your phone. I know that we don't use calculators as much as we used to. But the point is here is that this has to be something that you say, if it's important, it needs to be a priority. And so that is something that we have to carve out. We have to find time for that. And then that brings us to the third challenge that we often have is knowing how to do it. I may believe it's important. I may recognize that even though my business is small, I still need to be paying attention to it. I may carve out the time in my schedule to do it, but I also need to know how to do it. And so as I'm speaking to you, you may be an accountant. You may be a business owner that has been doing business for a long time and you have your systems. There are many, many systems for doing record keeping and bookkeeping. And I'm just going to present the systems that I have found work with small businesses. And we will talk in a later course about getting a little bit more complex. But I'm going to be assuming that you are at the beginning stages just because I have found that many small businesses tend to be at the beginning stages and have potential to grow. If you are someone who has been doing record keeping for a long time and bookkeeping, I hope that you are open to mentoring others who are in the class with you. I hope you're willing to share what you are doing. Best practices from business to business of what works and what doesn't work and how I've made it simpler for myself. Those are things that we need to pass on and to be able to encourage each other in this. Do you know how many days it takes to create a new habit, whether it is a bad habit or a good habit? People say that it takes about 21 days. I like to say 30 days just to make it a good solid month. It takes 30 days to start a new habit. And if you think about it, once you've developed the habit of maybe brushing your teeth in the morning or at night, it becomes something that you do without even thinking. I cannot go to bed at night without brushing my teeth. It's just a habit. It's ingrained in me. I don't have to think about how to do it. It just naturally happens, right? And that's the same thing that we want to look at for bookkeeping. It's a habit that you have to develop. And those habits take discipline. And discipline is never pleasant at the time, but as the scripture says, it produces a harvest. And that's what we believe can happen when you apply this discipline to your life. I want you to take your hands right now and put them together and then cross them, all right? Now, depending on who you are, usually if you're right-handed or left-handed, you will have one thumb that comes above the other. And so right now for me, my left thumb comes above the other one. Now I want you to reverse the crossing. Move all your fingers back, and I want you to fold your hands with the other thumb on top. Doesn't feel right. It does not feel comfortable. When I fold my hands, again, I don't have to think about it. I automatically have that left thumb on top. If I am developing a new habit, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's not going to feel right. I'm going to want to go back to the way things were because for whatever reason, this just feels right. And yet I have to live in that discomfort in order for it to grow comfortable. And so that's something that you need to think about, that this is something that will be a challenge. But hold yourself accountable to each other. And that's why I love when this ministry can take place in and through a church where you know each other, you worship together. You can call each other up and say, hey, I'm doing my bookkeeping now. Just a reminder, you said you were going to do it today as well. And let's hold each other accountable and support each other to do this. There's no official right way to organize your books. Now, if there's an accountant in the room, I may get some pushback on that. But what we see is that there are all different ways for how you can organize your books, and it can be as complex as you want or as simple as you want. But there are two main things that we want to track: the money that's coming in and the money that's going out. And so when you think about it in those terms, it can be very simple. I need to track the money coming in. What are the sources of income that are coming in? I also need to track the money that's going out. What are the different places that they are going to, and how do I track that? But the reality is, as you grow, the system will become more complicated. As we talked about in the very beginning, we have the structure of the house, and you have that in your workbook. And we've been working on the foundation, and then we went to the walls, and we did one of the windows. We framed in one of the windows for pricing, and now we're looking at the roof, and the roof is bookkeeping. And so you can have all different kinds of roofs. You can have a thatch roof, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing. If you have no roof at all, a thatch roof is better than no roof, and it's going to give some protection. But then you can move to the iron sheet roof, and you can move to the tile roof, and some of that we will do in a subsequent class if you attend that one. And so as your business grows, your system does have to become more organized and more sophisticated. But we at least need to start with putting that roof on and making sure that the business is protected. So I would say, as a non-accountant, but having done bookkeeping for years and years and worked with many, trained and mentored many others in doing bookkeeping, I'd say there's 4 things that you need to do to put a very simple bookkeeping system in place. Just these 4 things. And so even if I lose you in a little bit when we start talking about how to keep the records, just remember these 4 things and you're already halfway there. The first thing is this: if you buy something, but you don't need to pay for it right away, get an invoice. So let's imagine you're going out and you're getting some goods and you're taking it on credit, and later on you will pay the person back. Make sure that you get an invoice. And then in your business, in your office, in your home, wherever you keep papers, have a box or something that you label invoices and you put it in there. The second thing is, when you pay cash for something, get a receipt. Same thing, you have another box that says receipts and you put it in there. You don't have to think about it then. You are creating a trail, a paper trail, in order to help you to organize things later. If you sell something and you don't receive money for it right away, this time you were the ones giving the invoice. And of course, you want to keep a copy of that, and you want to have an accounts receivable. That is an account that you are looking to receive money from, and so you put that in a place for receiving it. Lastly, if you receive a payment, somebody gives you cash for something, you make a receipt. And so these are things that if you don't like to do books and you don't like to do math, at least you can be collecting the paper trail, collecting the paperwork, so that if somebody else can come and help you, you can give them these 4 shoe boxes or whatever you want to put them in, bags or envelopes. Give it to them and they can make some sense out of it and sort it out for you. And so that's one way to start. And yes, it takes a little bit more time. It takes time to give an invoice for somebody who's a friend or a family member, and you just want to say, oh, I'll remember. I have met with businesses, and when we have looked at the amount of people that owe them money, it is a huge sum. And they keep that on their records, and they say, oh, they'll pay sometime, but they know they won't. And so that becomes a loss for the business. And so start to keep track of that, and we'll go through some ways that you can do that other than giving an invoice every time. But those are important things to keep track of. And so in your book, you will see a transaction journal. And that is what we want to spend our time looking at now. And what you should have in your handbook is 4 pages of this transaction journal. And on the one side is the cash journal portion of it. And on the other side is where we will keep track of money for people that owe us as well as people that we owe. All right, so there should be 4 of those, because our goal and our hope is that you will do this every week for 4 weeks. And that is why we have 4 in there, so that at the end of 4 weeks, you have accumulated one month's worth of transactions, and you can begin to put those together to try to see a pattern. So our hope, our recommendation is that you take this type of bookkeeping, and if it works for you, you can make as many copies as you want and put it into a folder for yourself where you can track it by month, or you can keep track by year, and be able to have a system that you begin to develop and that works for you. So let's look at this more closely. And at the top of the page, you will see the working capital. And that is the money the total money when you're starting out that you have for the business. So what is the capital that the business has right now? You have to look at cash that you might have on hand in the business. You might have cash for the business in the bank account, in a business bank account. You might have cash that you've put into whatever savings and loan group that you might be participating in, whether it's a SACO or it's a SUSU or it's a merry-go-round or wherever you may have put money. And so you need to think about all those places where you have cash. Now, this becomes a challenge if we have not separated the business from ourselves and we look at the cash and we go, well, what's mine and what's the business's? That's where you have to begin making that separation so that you can know what is business money and what is personal money. So once you have added up where you have money and the amount that you have, you put it in that top box that says working capital. What is the total amount of money that the business has in cash at this time? The next box then is cash that you are going to be receiving from the business from your work week. And so there are 7 lines that are there. I don't know if you do your business 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 5 days a week. We encourage you to take a Sabbath, of course, and take a day of rest. But there you should be recording the date and then the description of sales and then the total amount that you have received in sales for that day. Now, if you own a provision shop, you're clearly not going to be documenting on one line everything that you sold. And so you just want to know the cash I started with in the morning, the cash I ended up with, that will be your total sales for the day. But maybe you are a carpenter and you are making beds or tables or chairs. You might not have multiple sales in a day, and you are able to record what you sold. That will be helpful for you when you want to look back and say, how many chairs did I sell this month? How many couches did I sell this month? And so on. And that is why this is the type of thing that we can also make available to you in Excel documents if you are using Excel, so that you are able to add more lines in and to make this flexible as you are working with it. So we want to record all the cash coming in. And that goes in what we call the first box there. And at the bottom, you will see total 1. And that is where you add up everything that you have earned in terms of cash in sales for that particular week. The next box is the cash out. These are your variable costs. And so, yes, the last session we talked about variable costs, and specifically we were talking about the costs that the customer takes with them. What is it that the customer carries away as a result of a sale or a service that you do? And so what did you pay for during the week for your variable costs? Now, service industries, if you are a hair stylist or if you are doing physical therapy or something like that, your variable costs are going to be very low because you're not selling products. Although hairstylists will definitely sell hair, they will sell different hair products, and so there may be some costs that you spent. And we don't have 7 lines in that one because usually we're not out shopping for our provisions for the store every day. If you are, we may need to talk about how to cut down your cost on transportation and time by being able to buy in more bulk. But that is where you want to be looking at the variable costs and the costs of what you have paid, where money has left your business to buy those things that you will be selling to the customer. At the end of the week, you put your total in that box, and that is your total too, is your variable cost. The third one we want to look at then is the cash out, this time for your fixed cost. And your fixed cost, of course, is those costs that are for the overhead, for the cost of having a business, but not something that the customer might ever see or know about. They're fixed costs, as we said the last time, because you have to pay them regardless of sales. So maybe in a particular week you are paying your rent for the month. Maybe you are paying for phone. Maybe you are paying for your electricity or your water bill for the business and not for yourself. Now, this is where I will often get questions from people who ask, what about my phone? I have one phone and I use it for my personal life as well as for the business. How do I handle that when it comes to my record keeping? And I would say that you should do it as best as you can to allocate how many businesses, what % of your phone use is being used for the business and what % of the phone use is being used for your personal life. If the % for your business is maybe 50%, then make sure that the business is tracking and paying you as an expense for the 50% of the phone use that you have. Is it important? Well, it depends, again, on how much you want to track to see where your business is growing. But if it is an expense and you are not acknowledging it as an expense, that is an unknown variable that you have where cash is going out, but you are maybe not charging the customer for it. It doesn't become one of your costs. And so, again, you want the customer to cover the costs of doing business, and if you are ignoring some expenses, that may end up hurting you in the end, as you will have to be the one paying for it. And so all the things that you pay for fixed costs go in that box, and that becomes your total 3. You add those up at the end of the week. The last box then is for other costs, and sometimes we may have a machine that we buy. That's not a variable cost. The customer isn't taking it. It's not a fixed cost. It's not part of just doing regular business. It's what we would put in a different part of our bookkeeping, which we will get to at a later time. But we at least want to acknowledge that it happened there. If you have something that you purchased for the business that doesn't fit into the other 2 areas, you would list it there and you would add that up. Then at the bottom of your sheet, you say that it says the formula that you want to put there. So you have the working capital. You want to add into that your total from box 1, so the income that you have earned. And then you want to subtract the totals of box 2, 3, and 4. And that should give you the new amount of money that you have to start your next week with. And so at the top of the page, on the other side of the sheet, you should have a place to put the total amount of cash that you have at the end of that week. Now that's where a lot of people stop. Good, I've kept my records, I know where things are going. But this is where we want to take it forward, and we say that we want to also now plan, what do we do with this cash? Because without a plan, your money will find a way to travel. Without a plan, you will have spending leaks. Money will find its way out if you have not allocated where it's going to go. So our recommendation in doing a budget, our recommendation in doing bookkeeping is that you always allocate everything. You don't leave anything, you bring it down to 0, because that means that you are planning, and then, of course, you have to work the plan. If you leave things in miscellaneous and other things like that, they will go very quickly. But you won't have a knowledge of where they went and how they went. And so in the box on the right-hand side of the sheet, you can see your subtotal for cash, what is available for you to use. And from there, you need to allocate how much do I need for working capital for this next week? What will I need in terms of my variable cost, in terms of my fixed cost, or in terms of other expenses? And I need to set that aside. Then maybe I have a loan payment coming up, or maybe I pay a loan once a month, Then you want to probably set aside 1/4 of that loan payment so that when that loan payment comes due, you are ready to make that payment. And again, what I would recommend, if you are at the beginning stages of bookkeeping, you get 4 envelopes, or you get some sort of a file box, and you put that money, if you feel safe enough to do that in your home, you put that money in that envelope for working capital. You put that money in the envelope for loan payment, and you then don't touch it. When I worked in one country, they said, if you put money in a loan payment envelope and then you put your hand in there, it's like a snake might bite you. You have to treat it that way, that is not money that we can touch. The next one then is the owner's draw. Now, we talked about putting yourself on a salary, and it is true that as the owner, you, of course, are doing this for livelihood. That's part of the purpose of doing business, so that you can also take care of your family. It's, yes, we help the customer flourish. Yes, we help the employee flourish, but you are also one of those persons working in that, and you, too, of course, need to flourish with your family. But we don't call what the owner takes a salary. We actually now want to introduce the idea that it's more called an owner's draw, because you need to be wise in how you take it. You don't want to say, like maybe an employee would say, even if there were no customers, the employee still wants to be paid. That's not their problem that there is no customers. It may be part of their problem. It may be partly their contribution or lack thereof. But ultimately, if you have an agreement to pay them a salary every month, regardless of sales, they're not being paid on commission, you have an obligation to pay them. The same is not true for you. You need to be willing to say, all right, we did not make enough money this month. I cannot take the full amount that I want the business to pay me, because if I do that, I'm taking from the assets from the business. So you have that flexibility to go below, but you also have the flexibility to go above. If the business is doing really, really well, you can take more than what was allocated. Just be sure that it is part of a plan, that you have a plan for what that range might be for you as the owner, and that becomes what is called the owner's draw. So out of that cash that you have, we have money for working capital, for a loan payment, for owner's draw. Then you may have some goals. You're trying to save up for a new machine, or you're trying to do something new for the business. Some of that money can go into that. Some of the money should go into savings. If you don't have 3 months of your fixed cost in savings, you should allocate some of the money for savings. Maybe you are going to be giving a gift to the community. You have something in your plan for corporate social responsibility, and so then you can write that down. And then you see the next line is leftover cash, and my hope is that is a big fat zero, and you have nothing that is left because everything has been allocated. And the whole idea with this is then when and if you have a challenge of people asking you for things because you have a business, you can actually say, I can give from my salary, I can give from my owner's draw, but I can't give from the business goals that we have put aside. I cannot give from the business savings because this is God's business, and He has shown me a strategy for growing this business, and I need to protect that. It's not my money, it's God's money, and that is a legitimate truth. God is the owner, and you are the manager. On the other side of that sheet is the accounts receivable and the accounts payable form. And what we have found is that for some businesses, if you're selling construction or carpentry, or you're selling clothing, you can give an invoice. It's easier for you to give an invoice if somebody wants to take a product and pay you for it later. Then you can have an invoice that you give to them and you keep a record of for yourself. But if we're selling a provision shop, if we are selling things that move a little faster, you don't have time always to write an invoice. And so this is a form that you can record the date, the customer's name, and the amount that they owe you, and begin to keep track of it. And if the person doesn't pay you back, you were able to reach them. One of the things that you have to decide is, how will I handle credit? How will I handle people who want to take something and then not pay for it all immediately. And I know that it's very difficult to say we have a no credit policy, cash only, because a lot of people want to be able to do that. But it's also very difficult, especially in a warm culture, to hold people responsible to pay for that. And so a lot of people say, I just give, the first time somebody asks, I'll just give it to them. Well, that can be a very expensive thing for your business if you are letting everybody take one thing for free or one set of items for free, and then you have to try to remember who you gave it to if you're not recording it. And so it's something that I encourage you to talk about at the end of the session. How do we handle that? Because, yes, you want to be generous, and I would encourage you to do that maybe with those customers that you know, those who have proven their loyalty. So maybe you say to them that, once you have shopped with us over the course of a month or X number of times that we are able to extend credit, but not until that time. But come up with some sort of policy on that. The other side of that sheet are accounts payable. Again, you may be taking things on credit in order to sell, and then you have to pay people. And so this is a place where you want to record that to be able to keep track for yourself. What money have I taken? What goods have I taken that I owe money to? Because on the other side of that form, that does not show up. The only thing that form on the other side tracks is actual money coming in, actual money going out. And so if somebody takes some of your goods and they don't pay you, it doesn't get recorded on the other side. It gets recorded on this side of the form. So our encouragement is that you begin to take this, that you begin to practice with it, that you begin to talk to others about it and encourage each other to do this. And our hope is that you will start this tomorrow. If you are doing a business, there's no need to put it off. Start it tomorrow. Hold each other accountable. Encourage each other to do it. And do it every week for 4 weeks and see if you can't develop that discipline that will later bring a harvest of joy and bring peace to you and contentment to you and growth to your business. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time when we talk about customer satisfaction and marketing. God bless.